should be, you should be live.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay, at this time, I'll open the special meeting of the Planning and Zoning for Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Our first item is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. If anyone has a cell phone, if they could turn it to vibrate or shut it off, we would appreciate it. Just for purposes of, we have a few commissioners who are missing tonight. So Commissioner Carey will sit for Commissioner Foley and Commissioner Bernstein will sit for Commissioner LeBlanc. Okay, we've got our new business, which is discussion with SLAM Planometrics to discuss the plan of conservation and development. And Michelle is getting a cable, I believe. But once they're ready, we'll be starting up. Everybody got their package?
Work from the small screen.
Does everyone have printouts in front of them?
Yes.
All right, so maybe we'll start by just talking about the schedule.
Just for the record, if you
Oh.
could
Sure.
introduce yourself.
Sure, Pat Gallagher with the SLAM Collaborative. Thanks for having me. So we are still on track for our project schedule. We wanted to talk about a couple of things that we shuffled around just based on the timing of some other town activities related to the strategic plan. We had discussed pushing the survey back a little bit in the process, just so that we weren't being really close with when the strategic plan survey was released, and also give us a chance to look at some of the results and perhaps ask some follow-up questions. So right now, we are proposing giving you all a draft of the survey at the May meeting for review, and then turning that around and launching that within a week of that meeting. So looking at kind of mid to late May as the community survey launch. Typically, I'd recommend leaving that open for at least a month, and then we can see our response rate. We can always leave it open longer if we need to. And then the other item that we push back a little bit is our first workshop. And typically, that's done around the same time as the community survey. So again, just shifting things back a little bit. We do know that it's not ideal to have a community workshop in the summertime. And so I would propose looking at early to mid-June as an ideal kind of window for hosting that first public workshop. That's really for, in our sense, kind of a visioning workshop where we'll present some of our initial, key trends for the community, but largely about hearing from residents and businesses and other community members about the issues that are important to them. So I guess maybe we can discuss whether you're in concurrence with that timeline, and if so, we can work with Michelle to try to solidify some of the details, the venue, a date, and so on.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments?
Seems to make sense.
So where's the survey on this?
Right here, I believe, is the
okay.
survey.
Okay,
I think we have to watch workshops in early June. That is such a busy time for families and people. There's so much going on around that time. So, you really have to look at the timing of it and what we're thinking because of it.
Yeah, because you have graduations, you have
you have college
celebration
graduations, high
parties,
school
all kinds of
graduations,
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the kids are getting out of school,
Right. And we've gotta try and get it in before
We do.
the end of school or right around there because otherwise you
summer's gone.
get into July and everybody's on vacation and August vacation and
It says if you tap the laptop screen and bring up the mini menu, you can press source and change it to his laptop. Laptop screen, okay,
I'm not sure.
there you go.
Good for you.
Pat,
The
we had a
phone.
commissioner ask a question if the workshop can come before the survey. Or what is your expertise as far as
So
the
I would,
timing?
I would recommend, I know there's some concerns kind of as we get later in June that we're running up against some other town activities. I would say, we don't necessarily need results for the survey, but if we were to, let's say, launch the survey and the next week have the workshop, either late May or the first week in June, that gives us an opportunity to plug the survey to whoever attends.
Mhm.
I think that would be a good kind of combination of activities. You know, last week of May is Memorial Day, so maybe look at, you know, a Thursday in the last week of May or any day in the first week of June
For,
for a public
oh,
meeting.
yeah, I would almost go into June just because if people are doing Memorial Day weekend,
Right.
you might,
Takes a couple days for a cover.
yeah,
First
well, it's just,
Tuesday in June?
if you want it to be a Tuesday,
Well,
we don't have a normal meeting that day, that would be
yeah.
enough.
I don't know what their schedule is.
So that's like, the fifth, I think, around there.
Okay, we can follow up with our calendars and lock something in. And then traditionally, where have you hosted your in-person workshops? Is it at a school, town hall?
You know, to me, a really nice setting for one might be the Wapping facility, because it has a nice, that room there, you can put round tables and things like that in it. The banquet room there. I don't know with the transition going to the school if it's gonna be available or not, but I could certainly investigate it.
Yeah, June 1st, I thought that's going over to
Okay,
the
so we may
school.
need- So, we could look at the community center, you could do something in the community room there. If you're trying to get, like, what kind of a setting would you like, round
Yes,
table
So
type
ideal
setup?
would be to have kind of a main seating area. Usually we'll kind of kick things off with a brief presentation, 15, 20 minutes. We can look at maybe doing some polling as part of that. And then having kind of breakout areas either on the perimeter of the room or in a adjacent room where we could do poster activities or other kind of hands-on exercises. Gymnasiums work great as long as we can get tables and chairs set up.
And I think, you know, worst case scenario, we could do something here at Town Hall with our council chambers and the other rooms here in Town Hall. I mean, that's certainly something if we could do. It would be nice if we could solidify a date sooner than later, just for, if you guys have a quad board meeting, you could announce it at that, and, you know, we could start getting some word out, so maybe
Yep.
we can coordinate.
Just,
Let's look at the first Tuesday in June.
yeah, and
It's
we
the 6th.
do have
June sixth, okay.
The 6th.
the quad board meeting on the 6th.
No, you have one this Thursday, I
No, no,
believe.
Oh,
first
yeah,
Tuesday in
okay.
June is the 6th.
Yeah, the 20th is the,
So
Okay,
this
okay,
would be a
good.
community, out to anybody to come out kind of community workshop, correct?
Yeah, I think we're gonna wanna, try to figure out conflicts and venue, and then try to get notices out as far out as possible.
Yeah,
'cause
so
I
I,
think,
it was something we want to do pretty quick here.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, and we know we have the meeting room for our meeting anyhow, or normally we would, you could check our meeting room, sure. I said, worst case scenario, it could be town hall, we could have different meeting rooms in town hall for breakout. We're kind of under construction here at town hall. I don't know if anybody noticed, but our
Yeah.
main floor is being torn apart, so. The other places we've had is the Friends Room at the library, which, but doesn't really have too many breakout areas. That's the only problem with that room.
Community center would be nice.
community
Community
center.
center would be, if it's, but they may have a lot of programming, we may come in conflicts. So I just may need to work on that.
Okay, sounds good. Follow-
We've done the fire headquarters before, where you've used the main room there, and they have breakout rooms there. It is a lot of setup, though, it's required to do that versus other rooms. But,
Maybe
Okay.
could use TE.
yeah, I'm just not familiar with getting into the schools. I don't typically use school buildings for public meetings. I'm sure anything's possible, but Let me see what I can find with
Yeah,
around
actually,
here.
school cafeterias, but I've worked, I've done many workshops, that tends to be a decent venue as well, as long as the, audio video setup, can be
Okay.
there if you need. I know gym space is usually always at a premium, so it'd be
Yeah.
tough to.
You may find if you try to use Wapping that there's no furniture left because
That's what I'm saying,
already,
that they're changing, yeah, so that's
they're
probably
already
not gonna
moving
be.
stuff out of there.
Community center would be ideal, it just may be, we'll have to look around the night and see if we can get something that night.
I have a contact for the schools, I'll give it to you, I'll send you.
Okay, all right, so I'll coordinate with you and we'll shoot for that June sixth being the night and then see if it's.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Any other questions on schedule? Talk through some of our progress to date. So we completed our immersion day back in February. Thanks to Michelle for helping us reach the right folks. So we sent questionnaires and had follow-up interviews with most town departments, which is great. So, a big part of our POCD is to understand all of the different things that are happening in the town department and town departments and enshrining them in a single place. Really an opportunity for folks to learn about what's going on elsewhere in town and try to find some synergy between goals and objectives.
Before you go on,
Sure.
I'm the chair of the Water Pollution Control Authority. I never saw the questionnaire. It was not interviewed, so I assume you worked with staff on that?
It
or-
would have been Tony,
Mhm.
Tony on that one.
I'm also noticing there's very little about the sewer system in this entire package, which I think needs more attention.
Yeah, so sewer system is something that we were intending on covering more in the development theme. We could certainly talk about elements of it today that aren't
I
sustainable.
mean, it should get equal play with the water system, which you have in here.
Okay.
Um,
And then Michelle's been helping us wrangle the various board commissions and committees. To date, we've received 3 responses. We'll certainly follow up and try to get additional feedback from these groups. And then I think Michelle also had a few others that we would reach out to who weren't on the initial mailing. And certainly, if it's something that you want to talk about at a WPCA meeting, we can certainly send that to your group as well.
Michelle, do you need help with, we might be on some of these,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, it was interesting, because I think you reached out to all the chairs of all these committees, so, I've reached back out to economic development to see, if they were gonna do
That's
one,
a
I
big
felt out
one,
with
yeah.
town council,
Yeah,
followed
yeah.
up with that one. But if you're on any of those other commissions, by all means, I can get you what the survey looked like.
Okay.
It was 5 questions essentially, it wasn't,
okay.
yeah, I was a little surprised we didn't get more feedback. Park and Rec, just Park and Rec Commission, we probably wanted to, because I don't know if the facility planning is really existing
So you
anymore.
did not get anything from Park and Rec?
We didn't get anything from, the only 3 we got anything from are the 3 bottom right there.
The blue ones.
The
The
blue
blue
ones.
ones, that's why they're in
Yeah.
blue.
So-
Hello.
It might be something at your, we didn't send to the Board of Ed though, did you?
Not to the board itself, but we meet with the superintendent, so.
You got the superintendent, yeah.
Yeah, if you could send me the questions, I'm on demo and.
So another group
Yeah,
that
me
ought to
too.
be,
I'm on 2 of these,
Okay.
so.
another group that ought to be contacted is Walking Ways. They're very heavy into sidewalks and planning a big trail. You didn't mention the trail and stuff, but
Would they come under Park and Rec or?
they're a subcommittee of the Park and Rec, but they operate almost completely independently.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. We'll reach out.
Does anybody else own any of these?
I know we have a brand new art commission too, I heard last night, that started. Art committee, I'm not sure if it's committee, commission. Oh, sorry. Which I thought was interesting.
And certainly we'll invite all of these commissions to the workshop, make sure they're on the distribution list when that goes out, and obviously the survey as well. All right, and now I'll pass it over to Glenn to lead us through our conversation on sustainability.
Great. This is kind of an exciting topic for us to talk about overall. The current POCD really did not have very much in it in terms of the concept of sustainability or the concept of resilience. They were emerging 10 years ago, but really didn't have the prominence that they do today. So I think this is something good for us to start with, because I think it's going to be a key element of the plan. It's going to work through a lot of the different chapters and sections. And I think our goal here today is to have discussion about these issues with you, to get your thoughts and feelings about what does this mean, both to you and for the community, and really in sort of the long term. So we've broken it into two pieces here tonight. First, we're going to talk about the concept of sustainability and the general sense of a definition that can work in a situation like a POCD, is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that can play in a lot of different ways and a lot of different resources. So I think talking about sustainability as part of the plan is important. Again, the 2014 POCD, page 30, had a little sidebar which talked about the concept of sustainability. So I think I can guarantee we're going to have more than about, 15% or 18% of the page on sustainability on this effort overall. So what are the benefits of sustainability? There's this group called Sustainable CT. I'm sure you've heard of them in terms of their activities. And they've identified these 8 icons here as representing different elements of the benefits of sustainability. Environmental impacts, greenhouse gas reduction, health and wellness for residents of the community building in terms of solidifying, strengthening relationships and interaction between residents and the community, climate resilience, economic well-being, cost savings, and equity. And so I think those are some of the opportunities for us as part of this plan to think about how this ties into different elements, because this is also fairly disparate in terms of these different elements. But I also want to talk about Sustainable CT for a second. This is an organization that's been around since 2016. It didn't really exist before that. And again, that was after the 2014 POCD. But the organization really got started with this whole idea, what is sustainable, what does it mean? And they put together a program which identifies ways that communities can be sustainable. So there's 131 communities in Connecticut that have registered for the program. There's 169 municipalities. Communities have worked on different elements of the Sustainable CT program. There's different levels of certification, bronze, silver, and gold. So 59 communities, roughly, well, not quite a third, roughly maybe close to half, I guess, of the communities had to get certification is what they were thinking about doing. South Windsor registered in 2018, and so we're participating in the program. Just as an aside here, Sustainable CT recognizes sustainability as having 13 different components to it. And this includes, again, a wide range of activities, thriving local economies, natural resources, cultural ecosystems, inclusive engagement, energy infrastructure and operations, just a variety of different things on the list. And I think as Pat and Mike and I were talking through, we think that these categories from Sustainable CT can be organized into sort of 4 main groupings. What we might call ecologic sustainability. These are things like energy, natural resources, et cetera. Economic issues in terms of promoting sustainable economies, social and health issues, and then also planning and management types of activities. They focus heavily on these certification requirements. It's almost like being in school all over again in terms of trying to do grading and everything else. I have to give kudos to the town for its efforts on this. They got 535 points, which makes them a silver certified applicant, but in fact never received the certification because of the amount of work and effort that goes into this. And as you can see in the portion of the slide on the left here, there's different categories where activity levels are required. You can't do them all in one. You got to spread them around. There's 3,000 points total, and you're supposed to figure out ways to do these types of things. And again, for South Windsor to have receive 565 points total, be silver certified is quite an accomplishment. Not a lot of communities got that far in the process. But you also did quite a bit in terms of getting to this level of activity and points, et cetera. So just really quick, 175 points were earned from a complete streets policy and integrating sustainability into the POCD. 140 points for optimizing for equity, increasing the use of renewable energy in municipal buildings, recycling materials, developing an open space plan, implementing South Windsor's own sustainability action plan item, et cetera. And then going down the list, you can see the different point levels, 50 points or more, 25 to 45, 20, 15, 10, and 5. But all of these activities and points ended up with quite a list of accomplishments. But I think it's important to recognize too that South Windsor decided that the program was a good start to get going, to figure out sort of what sustainability is. And I think from our work and from what we've seen, South Windsor's become a leader. You are way ahead of a number of other communities in terms of what the community has done, so kudos to you. And I think this results in a culture of sustainability, we'll call it. But I think from talking with people in town, the idea is that the program itself is very rigid, and it almost feels like you're chasing your tail a little bit in terms of trying to get points. So instead of being sustainable and thinking of sustainability, it becomes a case of chasing, kudos from people for different types of activities.
It was kind of like filling out your income taxes 13 times.
Oh, did you have to say that on April, day after tax day, right?
And I know when Sustainable CT was founded back in 2016, there was kind of talk of, well, if you may have certifications, you may be eligible for financial assistance, but none of those kind of carrots have really come to fruition. So I know a lot of municipalities are kind of frustrated that it takes a lot of work to get all of your, submittals in play, and at the end of the day, all you're left with is a kudos, you have a silver sticker. But again, as Glenn said, it provides a really good framework. I think it started conversations between maybe different boards and commissions that are working on different parts of sustainability. But I think a lot of communities are starting to see that, the chasing the points may not necessarily be the priority going forward.
So I think our suggestion for the POCD is that we are cognizant and aware of what their framework is. There are things that we can do in our community to make us sustainable and resilient in the future. And so that perhaps our suggestion could be for the POCD is that our efforts move in that direction rather than trying to chase the points as part of the program. I think we could put a little silver medal on our website saying we're Sustainable CT, but I think given the amount of work that goes into this, and continuing to be registered and certified, et cetera, is quite a bit. So our general approach and thought here overall is let's embrace the culture of sustainability that South Windsor has started with and continue to build on this in the future. Whoops, sorry about that. So we also think that sustainability for the POCD probably has three components to it, what we would call environmental or ecological sustainability. Those are things like energy and environment and other things. Business sustainability in terms of making sure that we are closely aligned in terms of business and economic aspects with what our community needs, what our citizenry needs, and then the societal or social aspects of sustainability as well. And aging population, social isolation becomes an issue. South Windsor's done a great job at civic participation, but sometimes, particularly in COVID, et cetera, people don't get as socially involved. And so we think if we think about these three elements as being part of our sustainability, it'll carry us forward. And so when we look back at what Sustainable CT said the elements or the benefits are, they really, we think, group into sort of three elements, these three elements. The ecologic concept is the environmental impacts, greenhouse gas reduction, and climate resilience. The economic aspects are economic well-being and cost savings. And then also the social aspects relate to health and wellness, community building, and equity. And I think, again, that can be a framework for us going forward in terms of sustainability. So in terms of ecological sustainability, Our thought here is that in the area of energy, perhaps the commission and the POCD should suggest goals of reducing overall energy consumption and promoting green technology. I think there's a number of accomplishments here, both from the committee that Steve's worked on, but also other departments in town, Planning and Zoning Commission adopting regulations. So I think that we are with the schools too, with the high performance building standards. So there's quite a lot of good work that's been done here, and I think the POCD should encourage and promote that moving forward.
Something I would add here is taking advantage of new legislation in the energy area. For example, I think it's now becoming economically desirable for these warehouses to put a lot of solar on their roof. So pushing out, this into the business community, I think is our toughest area. I don't know how to phrase that, but for now you can fill up the roof of a warehouse with solar, generate far more energy than these modern warehouses ever gonna use, and you can sell that within the new state. And I think the POCD or the PURA is working on, forming the regulations to make that actually work, but that's been in the law now for over a year, so.
Yeah, and I think encouraging this as part of the whole permitting process, et cetera, is a key issue going forward. Recently traveled to Massachusetts, driving down a roadway, minding my own beeswax, and there I come across a parking lot that's got the solar collectors on the structures in the parking lot. And this requires a little bit of a change of thinking, right? Because in the past, is that building coverage? It's impervious cover. I mean, how do we deal with that from a zoning perspective when in fact it can provide shade for the cars underneath while also generating electricity, which benefits the community? So what might we do with regard to those types of things? So I think this is an area which I feel you guys have been a leader on again, and continue to encourage these types of efforts. I think transportation, this also gets into the issue about climate change, et cetera, but reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing fossil fuel consumption. The town is looking at getting its first electric vehicles, I think, into the fleet, which is a step forward. Your regulations on EV chargers, I've seen your language show up in other municipalities. I've used it in some other municipalities. But also enhancing opportunities for alternative travel modes, et cetera. This is an area where the community should continue the good work that it's done. Also, in terms of ecologic sustainability, is this concept of the water supply, making sure that we have safe water supply going forward, adequate water supply, quality, quantity, reducing water usage, protecting water quality. These are the plans from the 2014, or the maps from the 2014 POCD showing the service areas, MDC in the southwest part, and then Connecticut Water in the north and east. And then also the groundwater the green circle.
Doesn't work on the screen.
No, I can roll over there and touch it or whatever. But the aquifer recharge areas around the pumping well fields that provide for this type of protection, et cetera.
The reason I mentioned the sewer is because in terms of the resilience, we had a July, not the last July, but the previous July, where there was so much rain and so much rainwater leaking into the sewer system that the sewer plant was operating at like 90% capacity. So just making sure the sewer system is given the same attention, and it is. I mean, that's our job on WPCA, but it's something I think people need to be more aware of, is how important that is.
Thank you. Another element here is stormwater management. This is a growing issue of significant concern. We deal with issues along the Connecticut River and the flooding that occurs there, but also from the other waterways in town. Climate change is resulting from more frequent, more intense storms, which are overwhelming. The drainage calculations that were done for many years based on historic storms turns out to be not the best premise overall. So we can end up with flooding in these types of situations. LID is a way for us to start to address that in terms of water quality, treating the first element of rainfall. The standard has been the first inch, if you will, in terms of water quality. I think that they're looking at increasing that standard in the new stormwater quality manual the state's adopting. So it's gonna go up from treating the first inch. So just when we thought we had that down, the standards may change there in the future too.
What's LID?
I'm sorry, low impact development. It's infiltrating rainwater close to where the raindrop falls so that we don't have to have huge pipes, et cetera. The old concept, if you will, in stormwater drainage was capture and convey. We get it into pipes and we get rid of it as quickly as possible. And what we're now realizing is that actually depletes groundwater recharge in some of the places that we need it. And the amount of rainfall that needs to be conveyed is a significant volume in a bigger drainage basin. Whereas if we can get that rainwater into the site close to where the raindrop fell, it's a much gentler approach from a capacity and a quality situation. So the state and federal government have what they call the MS4 permit requirements. You may have heard that terminology, but it's municipal separate storm sewer
System.
system. There we go. But it's the basic idea that these requirements are being pushed down from the state and federal government. Municipalities get stormwater permits. So the introduction of these and the management of these falls to public works and engineering departments, et cetera, in town. So stormwater is a growing issue and concern. Waste and waste products, I mean, the town has gotten points from Sustainable CT for its recycling, waste management procedures, et cetera. From our discussions with town departments, everything seems to be working well in this area. Special recycling for electronics, hazardous wastes, et cetera. And this is an area, our goals reduce waste generation and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions are part of ecological sustainability as well. Now make a transition into social sustainability, and this is now where we start to get into the issues related to, for example, here, diversity, equity, and inclusion. South Windsor has become a more diverse community in the last several decades in terms of its population. You're an example to other communities that, evolution of a community and diversity, et cetera, is something to embrace and not to be concerned about or afraid of. So possible goals for the POCD are to increase awareness, continue the work that the town has done in terms of educational and other programs to help people be aware and refine town policies and programs with regard to this. And again, the town is the town-wide assessment, ADA assessment, the Affordable Housing Plan, and the recently adopted regulations for inclusionary zoning are certainly supportive of this direction. I think health and wellness, promoting public health, and maintaining and enhancing the quality of life. The health department has prepared a community health needs assessment, identified issues in the community that need to be addressed. So again, you've been doing a good job in this area. Congratulations. And I think recommends that we continue in this area as well. Community involvement, we're trying to juggle our survey around the other survey that the town's been doing, but I also think with the educational programs, et cetera, and the information that's on your website, you do a good job with community education. And again, plan recommends that those activities continue. Economic sustainability, having a healthy economy, retaining, creating jobs, facilitating the provision of goods and services, making sure we have a strong tax base for the future is important for us in terms of having a manageable tax rate, et cetera, to support the community. And that relates to municipal capacity and fiscal stability as well. We were surprised, I think, at some of the impacts and implications from COVID. Played out in ways we hadn't fully anticipated, but I think the town responded well. we need to keep thinking about how we can have a community that's well configured for these types of challenges in the future. So one of the questions that we wanted to kind of pose to you as part of the POCD is how to embrace sustainability in the plan, and there's a couple of different approaches here. The two that we've offered for your consideration is that in the current plan, we had sort of an approach of conservation, development, and infrastructure as being thematic elements that hopefully would allow the commission to know where to go in the POCD to find what you were looking for. And now the question is, does sustainability now show up at that level in terms of a fourth theme? Or in fact, is really sustainability, if it's going to be ecological, economic, and social, it kind of rolls through a whole bunch of elements of the plan. So one of the things we're going to want some feedback from you guys on at some point, even tonight, is which of these you think could be the better approach for the POCD moving forward. Is it a separate and distinct topic, or is it roll through the chapters? Possibly, if it rolls through the chapters, we might have an icon like the Leaf South Windsor that goes on a POCD page and says, on this page, when we're talking about transportation, or over here when we're talking about sewers, there's a sustainability issue that relates to that. Any thoughts on that question overall?
Yeah, not necessarily the question. I was curious about more of the economic sustainability. I was going to ask my questions at the end, but since we were just on it, and I guess it pertains to development, I guess the comments on slides 25 and 26 for economic sustainability, I honestly feel they are a bit vague when it comes to saying, we are supporting economic development, we're supporting jobs, what does that actually mean? And in my honest opinion, I think if we want true economic sustainability, I think we sort of need to embrace, more mixed use and multifamily development, not only for residential, but also if we want to have, commercial development that is sustainable for the town through the tax base. If we want to, make more of a profit for the town so we have a chance to lower the taxes, we have more mixed use development rather than having one building on a massive lot with massive parking regulations, cutting down a bunch of trees and not making much profit. So I struggle with that because I think if we want true economic sustainability, we are planning our commercial zones in a lot better way. And, that's sort of for us in the next 10 years to rewrite our regulations throughout the town to say, hey, maybe, instead of having these, massive parking lots, massive regulations, maybe we rethink it and say we don't want too much asphalt, cutting down trees. We want to preserve a lot of that. And that's also where conservation comes into play. So that's what I sort of, I'm not going to say I had a problem with, but that's sort of what I define economic sustainability. I wish we have a bigger target and less ambiguity on that.
Yeah, I think that the issues that you raise also get addressed in other sections of the plan. For example, the development section of the plan is going to be dealing with business zones, uses, and the concept of economic development. And I think all we want to introduce here tonight is the concept that has a sustainability element to it. So the two of them are going to come together. At this point, these aren't really planned chapters just yet. They're kind of a framework for discussion to kind of get the juices going. And then based on the feedback we get from you, from the community at the meetings, in the survey, et cetera, just tie it all back in and figure out how that story gets told. So I think the vagueness right now is a good observation on your part, but I think our goal here is to get it actually more focused and figure out where's the best place in the plan to tell that story going forward.
All right.
I like option 2, and I'll say, I was kind of thinking, hey, it's too bad when we do the POCD, we don't really think about the sustainability program, and here you guys laid it out. So I was delighted to see that. I don't think it belongs in a little square off to one side. I think it flows through everything, which is the way that whole program is designed as well. So I like option 2, and anything we can do to highlight those things with a little icon or something would go well.
I think the other thing too is that there's gonna be grant programs in the future that are probably gonna start to bring these things together. So if we're talking about sustainability and we're also talking about mixed uses in business zones and they're coming together, there may be a grant where that just, sends us to the moon in terms of eligibility and possibility of getting those types of things. So it could pay dividends there as well.
I think when we were going through the two options, one of the drawbacks of option one is that you're just touching on the sustainability items, so you lose some of the context on, let's say, economic sustainability when you have a whole separate chapter on the non-sustainable elements of economic development. So I think there's some pros to having the organization of sustainability integrated with the other relevant components.
So your question, it seems to me, is about how do you best frame up a communication? Because that's ultimately what this thing is, it's a communication. And I would say the answer is, based on whoever's writing it, how they can best achieve their goal. Because I could sit here and I could see the argument, the thing is called the Plan of Conservation and Development. Option one maybe should just be development and conservation, and sustainability and infrastructure should channel through it. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. Calling out sustainability uniquely, like if I'm thinking about what this final product will look like and then having that icon, why just that one thing? Are there not other ideas, elements, important things to the town that would also be called out, like you see in a lot of different books?
The current plan's 10 years old, so the idea 10 years ago was that conservation, development, and infrastructure was a commission-friendly way to organize the topics. So you could be in the middle of an application or a special permit or anything, and you'd say, oh, I know where to find that in the plan, right? But Pat's done a lot of work, as has Mike, in terms of reconfiguring the plan in a way that resonates locally with the issues that the community faces. And so conservation, development, infrastructure has been our past, but it may not be our future in terms of the POCD. But I think Steve's comment here is that sustainability, no matter how we organize the plan, can be a concept that plays throughout, is probably useful for us. All right, so I think that decision about how the plan will get organized, et cetera, is something that we can also talk about later. Any other issues or thoughts about sustainability? The next slide gets us into resiliency, so I don't want to jump there just yet.
I'm leaning towards option two also. Because the sustainability does come into play in a lot of different aspects of the plan.
I agree. I think it's a good way to tell the whole story based on everything we've just gone through with sustainability. Each slide touched on different parts of that, so I think it helps tell the whole story with some continuity to it.
I mean, I think that definition at the beginning, I don't know where you got that from, but it kind of keys into every area. What are we doing now to make things good now and not mess things up for the future?
It could be the definition for planning.
And really, even in our old plan, Bart's cover letter, addresses environmental sustainability, economic, we have the three options. I think we just didn't do 10 years later a good job bringing it all the way through, so two makes perfect sense.
I think it's interesting too that the concepts of sustainability generally started with the ecological angle. They kind of co-opted the term, but I think now, as you'll see, from Sustainable CT's approach, et cetera, it does contain all these other elements which are predicated on the same principles. So resiliency often falls with sustainability because resiliency is the concept of the capacity of a community to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of stresses and acute shocks they experience. And so sustainability can help us understand the implications of these types of things, but resiliency means that even if there are interruptions or changes, fundamental changes, building in the capacity to be able to adapt to those can be important. So there was a page in the current P O C D that deals with the concept of natural hazard mitigation. This was highlighted in the CROG Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan as being a good example for communities in terms of what South Windsor had done as part of that plan. But I also think that this has grown too. Now we think of resiliency as having, again, similar components as part of the plan. So some of the areas where resilience can be important is, again, the whole concept of climate change. The storms are more severe and intense, so culverts under roads, neighborhood flooding. One of the things that we discovered from our interviews was that Public Works Department has really good knowledge of where the problems are on roads, but there's not really a master drainage plan in terms of where we're likely to have more and more problems in the future. So this is kind of a seat of the pants situation, and resilience could mean that perhaps finding the most efficient places to address problem areas could be useful or important here overall. Natural hazards, winter storms, hurricanes, other things that can happen that would affect our community or create disruptions in the way things normally happen. And if I had told you 10 years ago we were worried about pandemics and contagious diseases, you probably wouldn't have believed me, but here we are. And the scenarios and situations that we found ourselves in and how we adapted to those. The CROG Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan had some interesting observations on this, including the concept of, prescription medicines. What happens if the entire sort of supply chain and stuff gets disrupted? What can or should regions or communities do in this regard? Things we've never really had to think about before. So these are the issues in terms of resilience, just building in a flexible approach to the future rather than a rigid approach to the future, and to embrace that as part of the plan.
Can you, I don't see anything about industrial accidents or events of that type.
Yeah, I think, good point.
Or terrorist events.
Fortunately, we don't have any mainline rail lines going
Can
through
I
town.
ask you what you mean by economic transformations? What does that mean?
I think we're going through this situation currently, the transition to online retail, so brick and mortar stores. There have been changes that have occurred in occupancy of complexes, the nature. I spent 3 years of my career working with a shopping center development company. And so we had sort of markers about when the character of a shopping center changed and your tenant mix was going to change. But those were generally sort of market conditions, not economic upheavals like we're seeing these days. And what does that mean for a community in terms of the ability to get goods and services locally, et cetera? So
I was looking and I was wondering if it, or what it could mean of like economic transformations in like our community where we've had a lot of warehouse development, things like that. Now we're dealing with noise issues and we're dealing with truck traffic and things like that. Where does that fall into a place where strategies can be looked at? I mean, is that sustainable or is that resilient? And people are resilient because they stayed around. I mean, where do we weave that into somewhere?
I wouldn't
Not
put
this
that,
area.
not in this section. I mean, I think this idea is an economic transformation. We have built a support system for our municipality based on our real estate taxes, the mix of services and everything else that we offer. If something happens in some way, shape, or
I
form
got
that
you, okay.
everything is gonna get delivered by a drone from out of Bradley. There's no warehouses anymore or anything else. I mean, is our portfolio diversified enough? I mean, that's sort of perhaps resilience for economic transformations, is that we're kind of evaluating these types of scenarios. And I'm not suggesting that we ignore certain elements of economic development, but I think just to have a dashboard, if you will, about these types of issues and be cognizant of what the future could bring.
And I think a good example of that would be, communities, let's say, that are reliant on a single large taxpayer like a shopping mall. How well equipped are you to, from a regulatory standpoint, of encouraging changes needed to maintain that as a viable tax-paying use? A little less relevant here in South Windsor, just given the mix of commercial industrial uses. But when we're talking about, I think we had this conversation during the interview, you have a limited amount of vacant land left, and warehousing distribution is currently the hot market commodity. If you develop all your vacant land with warehousing and distribution, are you resilient in the event that something transforms the warehousing and distribution center 10 or 20 years from now? How do those properties then adapt and continue to be viable tax generating uses for the community?
Another good example of this too is that I live in Simsbury. Simsbury had Hartford Insurance Computer Headquarters, 600,000 square foot building, largest taxpayer in town.
Huge. Yeah.
Huge. It's not there anymore. That building's gone. It's torn down. And the question is, what did Simsbury, what should they or did they do to build their tax base back up? Same thing in Middletown, right? Because
The
the ed
Aetna,
deficit.
yeah.
I mean, if I told you that a building's useful life was 30 years or less, back in the 1980s, you probably would have said you're crazy. Yet these types of investments, it just didn't make any sense to keep the building up and pay the taxes, so just take it down. Kind of
They
crazy.
knocked them all down except for one in Middletown. And FedEx went in there.
I think there's something that comes, you come from genetics and you have like a monoculture of farming, okay?
Farm, yeah.
And then you become much more vulnerable to challenges. And the same thing applies in economics, you have to be as diverse as possible in what you're doing. So if something happens, there's something that you can grow in its place.
And so these are, these types of transformations do take time, but I think, again, just being aware of them, I like the monoculture reference because I think that maintaining some level of diversity in our future land use, economic support for the community, fiscal stability, et cetera, is probably an important consideration. I think I had skipped a slide before. Just wanted to call out the Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. CROG does these with the region every 5 years. All the communities are participating and involved. This plan has evolved also. It recognizes South Windsor for its state-of-the-art emergency operations center and a lot of the things that the community has done and is doing with regard to this. We think that the next update of the plan is going to focus on both natural hazard mitigation and climate adaptation going forward. This most recent edition focused in on the issues of repetitive loss properties, which are areas, for example, in floodplains that, sure, flood insurance, every year it floods, every year you get money and you keep rebuilding it in place. And now they're focusing in on that and saying it really doesn't make sort of long-term fiscal economic sense for us to do this. How can we address repetitive loss properties? And I think in that vein, thinking ahead, natural hazard mitigation and what's going to happen with climate adaptation is going to tie into this. It becomes another hazard.
You want to also mention what's the group that is there to respond to emergencies? It kind of coordinates with the EOC, but they're volunteers.
CERT team?
Huh?
The Community Emergency Response Team?
Yeah,
Cert, yeah.
I want to mention that.
Are they still viable?
I think that's a good
Oh.
question.
Well, I think they kind of ebb and flow. I'm not quite sure the latest status, but we can certainly talk about that further with them.
I think knowing what we have for resources is important. Again, I think we were impressed with your staff in terms of the work that they've done in this area and just giving them support that they need. Just as many communities rely on volunteer fire departments because it's expensive otherwise to provide it. If we've got an emergency response team of volunteers, that's just great to have to support the other efforts in the community. We couldn't afford to keep everybody around all the time on the payroll. But so having volunteers, and I think Steve's question, are they viable, is probably a good indication going forward. In terms of the hazard mitigation plan, South Windsor got a lot of credit for the things that they have done and are doing in terms of hazard mitigation, specifically mentioned in the 2014 POCD, minimizing development in hazard-prone, flood-prone areas. And there's 20 action items listed in the mitigation plan, but the town's already working on a number of these. So, again, good work in the resilience area. And then moving forward, resilient power systems, solar, microgrids, microcells. What can and should we do to make sure that we have power to charge cell phones, et cetera? What do we do to make sure that cell phone service is available? A number of people are giving up landlines. Landline phones are becoming a thing of the past, and everybody's relying on cell phones. They're great. I just recently got a cell phone service map from the Connecticut Siting Council for a community. And they knew they had poor cell phone service, but this map showed that less than 25% of the community had reliable cell phone service. And so if there's a car accident and that's your hope of help, this kind of becomes a challenge.
You might want to add batteries with one of the slashes there somewhere.
Yeah, is it Public Works who was doing that? Did I read in the budget? Is that, the Public Works is investigating a battery storage?
We are talking about one, a couple
One for-
facilities. What
One for the middle school and one for the sewer plant.
So yeah. Thank you. And again, water supply and, again, the concept of medications in the future. I don't know how the town necessarily gets involved in this, but it's an interesting concept. So that's an overview of the sustainability and resilience research that we've done so far, suggestions for your consideration, thoughts, feedback for us going forward.
And Glenn, if I can just do a quick plug here. I know the last plan update, we had a series of briefing booklets that kind of came out throughout the planning process. And our intent is that for each of the kind of 4 areas, sustainability, conservation, development, and infrastructure, we're going to have a fact book, I guess we'll call it. And so our goal would be to add any or address any of the items we discussed tonight, and then create a sustainability fact book that then goes on the project website that folks can see and not necessarily have to wait for the final plan to come out. And then we'll be pulling elements from the fact book into the plan document itself when it comes out.
One of the big differences to me as I'm looking at this between sustainability and resiliency, when I consider a number of the key things under resiliency, it screams to me a need for regional government. Because if I take a look at climate change, natural hazards, public health events, economic transformations, if we're confronted with any one of those things as well as other things, it's not just going to be this town, it's going to be the whole area. And I'm not sure how or where that fits in, but that seems to be, I mean, a lot of the things you went over under sustainability feel more localized, where some of the things that you talked about that would fall under resiliency seems much more regional. And I have a bias, I really believe that Connecticut would do better with regional government than 169 little kingdoms. It just seems terribly inefficient to me.
I think you're right. I think the challenge for most people is to wrap their heads around that, because we don't have
I know that's a whole
good
different,
examples,
but
I know.
coming from other places that had regional government, I see the differences, and I don't even want to go there because it's just a large philosophical discussion.
Yeah, and I think we are making progress on this at the regional level. There are things that CROG has done for the region in terms of shared services and equipment and other things like that. Could we be moving faster? No doubt about it.
Well, I don't think the will, I think, it's a very old style way of government, and there's only 2 states and a portion of a third do it anymore, but it is what it is, and that's not why we're here. Just the thought is, I know we have some instances where I believe we have an arrangement with neighboring fire departments where
I mean, we have, so I think of our regional animal control facility. I mean, that's
Right.
several towns that participate in that. So I mean, we do have some examples of
Yeah.
those kinds of things. It might be worth gathering them and highlighting what they
So
do.
I guess the point is, in the context of resiliency, it might make sense to think about organizing efforts with neighboring towns. We would certainly need the resources if we had a monster climate issue.
We work with Windsor on health issues,
Right.
things like that. So we do
Exactly.
have some partnerships for sure.
I mean, we probably did that for COVID, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
we do a lot
Yeah.
with them for that.
Vaccine clinics.
Yeah,
There's a-
We do, regional, some IT, don't we, regional?
We have some regional IT, yeah.
So I think what Paul is suggesting is maybe we focus that into all of these pages, like, what are we doing regionally? Are there other opportunities?
Yeah, I did have a comment earlier, I forgot to bring up in the sustainability section, when we talked about transportation.
Sure.
You know, as you know, we've recently approved new residential multifamily development. And maybe in the next year or two, we'll approve another application, seeing how things go. And so I think with that, I'd love for us to at least have something in our POCD, you know, prioritizing, and I know it's easier said than done, but trying to work with the DOT to reroute one or two of our bus lines to go in and hit some of our multifamily zones, because not only is it, you know, important, not only for that, but, you know, there's several TOD bills right now in the legislature, and not only that, but it'll help us not only comply if those ever come to fruition, but the town can make money off of that, so that ties into economic sustainability. But no, there's a lot of people out there that, you know, we have bus lines already in South Windsor, but the problem is they swing through single-family areas where, you know, we know car dependency exists. But if we have bus stops closer to multifamily development, you know, people may think twice of maybe taking the bus into Hartford. So I think maybe at least trying to have a point or two talking about that and sort of planning for that in the future. And I say this because for my job, I've had to go down to the Southington Transportation Committee a couple times, and it took them an arm and a leg and 3.5 years to fight the state DOT to reroute one of their bus lines and pull it down into Southington. And, you know, it's hard, but it's possible. And so I say this because it's possible for us, if we ever want to do this in the next 10 years, to reroute some of our lines, hit Evergreen Walk, maybe hit Geisler's. So that's sort of what I was, you know, mentioning.
No, I think it's important, because I think as part of our work under zoning regulations for the town center area, they spend quite a bit of time looking at the bus lines and their routing and their schedules.
And there was a study that I sat on for a long time, and Sullivan Ave, for example, is on a list to eventually get a bus, but as you're alluding to, it's not easy to get them changed, but I could probably get you some reference related to that.
If you would, because I think as
Yeah.
part of our work later on transportation, this issue about, historically, we always thought about cars and vehicles, now pedestrian and bicycle. But I do think for the future, the issues related to transit, paratransit is also going to be an important consideration. And we are at the cusp of areas that have more transit service than we do. So how can we leverage off of that in ways that would help us?
I think to piggyback on your comment, another component of that would be the workforce component of, you know, if there's not bus access to your major employers, is that really creating the best economic environment for them if they're missing out on 10% of the regional labor market that they could perhaps tie
I
into?
will say
So-
to their credit, they recently contacted the town in the last 6 months, and they did reroute some of the busing down to get Coca-Cola and Home Depot. So they did make some changes down in that area, not significant, but as a result of a need down there. So that did happen fairly recently, or was approved to happen or go forward, so there's
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah, and then regionally, that's where we partner, because look at that big bus coming out of Manchester. You know, like the big Manchester bus station where you can,
Commuter lot.
yeah. You know, it used to be when there were a lot of people going to work, then, you know, that thing was really busy. A lot of people took the buses into Hartford via that, which is really close to us. It would be easy for us to use. Unfortunately, right now, nobody's really going to work.
Mass Transit is also working on a shuttle which would deal with Sullivan Avenue, but kind of be nice to have the regular bus service also going down there a few times a day.
Good.
Glad to see people on it.
Oh, that's a trick, 'cause, yeah.
Under your waste section, you had general comment, but food waste, is that something that, you know, is a goal maybe?
Yeah, so the state released a pilot program, I believe it was last year, where they gave grant funds to municipalities that applied. It was basically a food waste diversion pilot program. That's a pretty significant percentage of weight of municipal solid waste. And that seems to be one of the state priorities right now is diversion, especially with the closing of the trash to energy plant in Hartford. So that could certainly be an area where, you know, if you were to incorporate it into school facilities, town government, there may be funding opportunities in the not too distant future, looking at some of those diversion programs.
And you know, I miss the textile recycling. We used to do it. I don't know, COVID got rid of it and it's never come back. Michelle?
No, to ask
I don't know
if
why.
it is coming back, I'll find
Really
out. for
simple,
you.
pink bag, pick
Pink
it up.
bags, yeah, I still got some pink bags. in
Yeah,
there.
right?
Yeah,
Pink
I
bags,
think it was
pick 'em
something to
up.
do with the company.
Can't hoard them, Steve, you're
I'll
gonna have to
find
share them, okay? You can't hoard them, you're gonna have to share them,
Share
okay?
Well, every time you put a pink bag out, they give you 3 more pink bags.
I know.
One time the roll got dropped off in my front yard.
The
I
roll?
had the
Oh
whole
my
roll of
God.
them. It's like,
I put out my one pink bag and I never got another one.
Well. That's it.
Well, thank you very much for this conversation. I think going forward, we're anticipating a similar type of approach. I think it's these types of sharing of ideas and the feedback from you, which is gonna help us listen well and figure out how to integrate this and put together a meaningful plan, so.
Alright, so our next meeting will be in about a month, and we'll be focusing on both the conservation element and the survey. And then I'll provide an updated version of this at the next meeting with the workshop dates as well, and again, we'll work with Michelle to try to nail that down as soon as possible. And then we also have website update, and I'll pass it over to Michelle, and I can give you the code if you'd like.
we can get to the. Just give it a second, this is like a website that Caitlin and I have been building with our IT department, so it's not public yet, but it's internal. So we just wanted to show you what it looked like. Because we will be
Going live
going
at some
live
point.
soon.
Oh,
Giving everybody your password, kid?
Yeah, it'll be
And
good
she's
for like
leaving,
2
who
more
does she
days.
care? And it goes away.
Caitlin is
hoping the camera's not seeing this.
They are. It's only 2 days.
You're logging on, I'm gonna make sure I have the right login before I show everyone my passwords.
Yeah, you wanna do that? It's easier. Could shift to HTML code. Typing on the touchscreen is never easy. I've worked without that before, so.
I just can't remember the name. I know it's under.
Public transportation is tricky though, like all those stations that were built in Hartford,
Oh, well,
Okay.
oh,
you know, but with the pandemic,
Oh,
there's so
so
few people.
you- but it-
No, you know that was
Okay.
easier part.
Since you already have it.
I have seen people get off the bus at Sullivan Route 5 and walk up to the windows seen people get on
Not voice activated, huh?
Wellington Road.
Well, close your eyes.
I Stop and Shop Plaza there.
Mhm.
There's a couple bus stops. I've seen people waiting, but
Guys, words are gonna
Yeah.
leave out with this.
Just gotta cross our fingers for the next 2 days.
Bear with me while I find it, always takes a minute or two to.
This is why she can't leave. I will win this. So this will be basically hooked off of the planning and zoning page. There'll be a link for the POCD.
Welcome to your POCD pub page.
oh, look at the
Nice.
tobacco.
Very nice.
So a lot of these pictures can be changed if we wanna change anything that's pretty simple, but and a lot of things are not completed, obviously, but we're working with that. But we have a little landing area to review what the POCD is. We have a story map that should be populating. So we tried to incorporate a story map into here, which shows your timeline. Talks about, the scoping of the project, your elements.
No, nice.
We'll link the workshops in here.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go, you can.
No, I was just gonna say, like,
I'd
the
really rather
different,
you talk.
the different booklets that they get, that we get from them, we'll be putting out here. That'll be a link for everybody to get to.
Online community survey, and then, highlighting the meeting dates, agendas, minutes, in case anyone wants to look for those. These will be filled in depending on what happens. These are just kind of placeholders. Same thing with this area. Again, we're just,
Yep.
we might have a survey landing here, depending on, like, a quick survey, not even the community survey, but like a quick
A
survey.
map, like your 5 favorite places, and have people put, points out there, so, different.
We will one day get a picture of all of you guys.
We know we have you all here together.
And then, then you have more additional pages of reviewing what is the POCD for, residents who don't really know what the topic's about as much, so we kind of discussed a little bit what the past POCD highlighted and some of the goals that came out of it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have full resolution copies of those pictures that you could send us for the document? Oh, those are,
Yep.
you got some great ones in here.
We link our current POCD, that way someone can go right back to it.
Nice, really nice.
So these are kind of areas that we just kind of got the pages started. We didn't really have the information we wanted to put in yet, but in theory, this would be the plan development, your project areas. Project documents would live here, like tonight's presentation can go up there if we wanted to. The questionnaires can go up there.
So we don't have any links there yet. but
Yeah, we can make those, that's pretty simple, because they can just link from the website.
Mhm.
Says the girl who's leaving.
What'd you say?
No.
We wanna show community involvement, we would like to get a map of the workshops. or the
So
workshop
then
that
we'll
we'll
be populating that pretty quick here, won't we?
Yep.
Figure out where we're gonna do that.
And these are just vision strategies, these are again kind of placeholder pages right
Yep.
now.
I'll tell you though, that's not a bad, that picture made me think of farmer's market.
Yeah.
It's not a bad place to put up a little tent and, get some
Gather
community
information.
input, cause it's well
Yeah.
attended.
Although it's not as good as when it was at the community center.
That's the page.
It's
That's
more
great.
off
That's
of the street.
awesome,
It's great.
Caitlin.
That's
Beautiful.
That was a lot of Thad from our
Our
GIS, he was,
Yeah, so this is
very
actually done on a
helpful.
GIS platform, which is complicated to say the least, but it's, it's a great use of technology and really kind of the sky's the limit on how much you want to do with it, but there's another really good one that the health department did out there on our website, if you ever interested in seeing on, how information can be shared. So we're trying to make this one to be not too complicated, but user-friendly and give information out to people. So, again, we haven't launched it yet, probably we'll wait, we'll launch it at the time before we do the community workshop, so probably the next week or so we'll be launching it. Just wanna put in the pages like coming soon, the ones that we don't have text for yet, so.
Might be
Oh,
good,
nice.
I know there was some scheduling there, but this is pretty
The page.
clear,
Mhm.
you know, giving the public
Just
more
the project
direction, because
schedule.
that's one of the feedback that I heard, and I'm not sure if Stephanie or others had heard when we went through the plan, but, oh, why do you have to do this time? Well, if we let the public know as far in advance of what our schedule is, you know, maybe some of them will put in their calendars, whatever, you know, but give them the opportunity.
I could probably link
So
Nice
that,
job.
that right there is the essence of South Windsor, huh?
Well,
I s- I say that sarcastically because when I think about a lot of the comments, at the public hearings,
yeah,
that's what people
Well,
want.
Yeah,
That's
I
what they
said
want
that-
this town to be.
I said to Caitlin when we looked at it last week, we really gotta get some more development pictures in there, because we don't want to, you know, convey something that we're not.
That's where
I
we're
mean,
trying to link.
we're a
It's a
balance
great-
of it, and
it's
it's
a great
great, we
image.
have great pictures of that, but again, we need to have some more of, some more, and I think
Yeah,
you
we're,
did get some more,
It is
yeah.
development.
We've grown up a little.
To your point, Bart, do you want something, so the story map is kind of more, that gives a timeline. Do you want like that page that's in their booklet that kind of highlights the dates more?
Just
Somewhere in
like
here?
one focal point page that they can look at and see, if you wanna call it the whole timeline. And then, you know, it's broken up further.
Yeah, the timeline's nice. We,
The timeline,
yeah,
yeah,
the actual timeline.
we have that all left.
The story.
So we can pull that in. So you guys can check on it periodically.
Nice job.
Yeah, we'll put that on the website.
Login information in the new chapter.
Yeah, exactly. You guys can just keep replying.
Yeah, you could, when you launch, send us all the link.
Yeah, I
and-
will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
We'll have a launch party.
There you go. Let's do that.
I talk like I know what I'm doing.
You do.
I've been right over his shoulder the whole way.
Well,
That's-
so I think that concludes that part of our meeting.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good job.
Thank you, appreciate it. I think we've got one more thing on our, it's not on our agenda, but it's as important as anything else. And, you know, personnel changes happen all the time. And unfortunately, we're gonna be experiencing one in a couple days. And Caitlin's gonna be moving on to greener pastures and, you know,
Greener?
Other, just other.
greener,
Saw the
other,
picture. There are no
other.
greener
more challenges and, getting,
Career development,
There you
yeah,
go. I guess
more
career
exposure, and we wish you all the best with
more
you
frustration.
moving on.
It's been a pleasure serving the commission, and I've learned a lot, and I know more about planning than I ever thought I would, but I'm happy to know it.
Well, we wish your stay wouldn't have been as short as it was. But we've had the opportunity to get to know you and enjoy your company, and we wish it could have lasted a lot longer. And who knows, maybe in the future.
You never know. You never
Yeah.
know what the future holds, so thank you so much, everybody.
We'll miss you,
Don't
Caitlin.
make me cry on camera.
That's right, that was still live, I forgot. All right, shut her down.
Well, with that, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
We have motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes unanimously, we are adjourned.
If we
Okay,
break
time
it-
to cry now.
Okay.